Holbrook. I will be the moderator of this meeting. As our host, who will be running the Zoom portion of it, is the superintendent, Jim Coheen. And I'd like to welcome you all to a discussion on the proposed addition and maintenance and upgrading of the Spinelli Field bond issue that will be voted on by the public on the 2nd of November. The format for this evening will be different from the format that we followed in our previous informational meeting. This is a meeting that will deal directly with the bond and what it is and how we plan to finance it. The way we will start is to have the president of MSK give a short talk on the scope of the project. When he is finished, we will open the floor for questions. The host will click on the person who will be asking the question, and we will try to direct it to the number of people that we have who will serve as experts to answer the question. I hope we can move along on this, so we can.
Yes, I'm working from home today.
Excuse me. Well, just wait a minute. And we'll start then with the president of MSK, who is the engineer, one of the people that have been working on this project, Jason Dolmich. Jason, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks very much. And I'll just ask if possibly whoever's controlling or hosting the meeting can enable screen sharing so that I can share our presentation this evening.
You are now the co-host. You can share.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you. So good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Dolmich. I'm with MSK Engineers, and we are. I am here tonight with Jeff Goldstone and Tim Severance from Goldstone Architecture, as well as Ashley Hoyt and Mike Malloy. Ashley, the athletic director, and Mike Malloy, the field committee chair, among other things. And as well, we have a toxicologist, Laura Green, to provide a brief presentation as well. We're gonna do a brief recap of, or a presentation of this. We'll talk about we'll allow Ashley and Mike to describe the problem statement surrounding the current facilities, as well as, and then describe the proposed site improvements, as well as describe some of the building improvements and the turf and track upgrades. So without any further ado, Ashley, I'll hand it over to you to discuss some of the current challenges at the facility.
Great. So I'm Ashley Hoyt. I'm the athletic director here at the high school, also the middle school actually. And I'm basically just going to take you through the problems currently with our complex. And Mike might chime in after as well. But if you've come to the previous meetings, it's going to be a little bit repetitive, but we do want to get all this information out there to everyone. So our biggest issues right now are the current conditions with the surface of Spinelli, the actual playing surface itself, the building and the track. So for the surface itself, obviously, just has had basic maintenance over the last few decades. So a lot of uneven surfaces, divots, dirt patches, wear and tears, really big issues on Spinelli currently right now, to the point where we're not even playing our home varsity boys soccer game playoffs on that field. To go to the building, that red building right to the left on that picture, we currently use it for phys ed storage as well as athletic storage. And it does have the electrical component for the lights. And it did have bathrooms at one point. Obviously, that building has been condemned. The only reason why it's not taken down is because we still do use it to operate the lighting system. But again, that building needs to be updated and, just to make it more usable for not only athletics, but phys ed as well. And then our track right there on the right side of the screen, we now have an additional divot sinkhole. So we actually have 4 total sinkholes. Now we have, come up with another one over just the last couple months, 3 on the south end, 1 on the north end of the track. and it hasn't been resurfaced in almost 20 years. So those are the biggest challenges that we see right now with the field, the building, and the track itself. Another big reason we're going in this direction is just the playability and just, the community amenity that it could be. So like I've mentioned before, we currently only play games on Spinelli. We don't even use it as a practice site for any of our teams. So football has a different site, soccer, and then boys and girls lacrosse, they do not even play on that other than their senior games. So getting our spring teams out there sooner, usually it's, they're inside the gym for the first 3 weeks of their season. So getting them on a surface that they can practice and play on, including baseball and softball as well, because they will utilize a turf surface as well for basic, ground balls, fielding, and all that, where typically they would be in a gym. And then just like I've said many times, the amount of community inquiry I get for field use and to use our complex for a variety of different things, whether it's a clinic or a camp or, to host a tournament, we would like to meet the needs of the community and also, bring in that revenue and that opportunity for the town itself. Because most of those are, youth tournaments or youth leagues that, do feed our programs and would in all benefit, our athletic programs as a whole. I talked about it a little bit, the equity issue right now with our spring teams. They don't ever get to play on Spinelli other than their senior games. So this would, allow them to play all their games and play under the lights on Spinelli, as well as our baseball and softball team getting some field work in before their first games. Because typically, we're in the gym. We don't even sometimes touch our field, whether it's lacrosse, baseball, softball, before our first game, which obviously has a negative impact for our teams. And then the Vermont weather, right? Like we're experiencing it right now. And it's, it's Vermont, it's what we expect, but the playing conditions the next week are going to be terrible for playoffs, and the drainage there that we currently have just isn't ideal, for our fall teams. And then again, lacrosse, after the first couple of games with the snow melt and then the rain we get in the spring, the playing conditions are terrible. And I'm rescheduling a lot of games and, moving a lot of games and relocating our teams a lot as it is already. I mean, we rent MCLA's field turf all the time just to get our lacrosse games in throughout the spring. So those are a couple of big things for us. Obviously, we've talked about it before, but the turf itself, I know the injury, I'm not an athletic trainer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to talk much on the injuries, but I can tell you right now, a flat surface is going to do a lot better things, for our athletes than what they're currently playing on. So we see a lot of ankle injuries. We obviously see a lot of concussions in a variety of different sports. And we've talked about it a little bit with the shock pad being, a great thing for our athletes when it comes to, just G shock absorption, and then a flat, consistent surface is really what they need. So though that's kind of our, our why statement, our current conditions. And then I'm not sure if Mike's going to add anything to that or if it's going back to Jason, but I will obviously be on to field any questions later in the presentation as well.
I can chime in just for this is Mike, speaking. I'm just going to throw in a personal anecdote. I know you guys have heard from me for many times that we are unable to play a playoff soccer game on Spinelli Field is a sad, kind of day for Mount Anthony athletics, right? We have bad weather, coming up. The field is in very tough conditions right now. And it's only going to get worse. And we have a game scheduled for tomorrow. And we've already kind of moved the field up to Southern Vermont College. It's flatter. It's a better, spot for us to play a soccer game. So the boys have worked all season. They've won 10 games this season. We earned the number 4 seed, the ability to host multiple games. And it's a sad day when as a high school, you can't play soccer on the field that, it's just not safe for them and it's not great conditions. And so that's where we're at right now. Ashley and I had a discussion, last week, and we were just like, it's not going to be good. And this weather this week is even more telling. Games tomorrow will go off on turf fields. Like Burton will not have to reschedule their playoff game tomorrow. It'll happen, up in Burlington, South Burlington, where those games will go on. But we're looking at possibly rescheduling, possibly changing things around, like wherever. We're trying to find a space. So I'm just, as a coach and as a advocate for young athletes who have done everything that they could to earn a home playoff game at their high school, we are not able right now to play safely on Spinelli Field. So if that's not an indicator of kind of where we're at, I just wanted to share that with everybody as in the community, kind of going forward. That's all I've got.
Jason?
Yep. So, just to sort of carry that through, we took the problem statements from the committee and from the athletic director, as well as some other stakeholder inputs from the school, and really sort of dug in and completed a feasibility study and evaluation of multiple facets of the facility, which included a proposed track replacement, field replacement, the building replacement of the multi-use building, any additional site improvements, and then looked at permitting and overall cost. And that, in addition to the major components, which would be the track, the turf, and the ticket booth and bathroom improvements, which will be spoken about separately, the additional site improvements that we are looking at also include the a new scoreboard, long and triple jump, pole vault and shot put facilities, relocated and new visitor bleachers outside of the field area to provide for adequate and regulation field size. Lighting upgrades. We'll be replacing the existing lights. We'll keep the poles, but the lighting isn't planned on having new LED lighting. Accessible paths around the facility, as well as new accessible parking areas, and in addition, ticket booths. So the lighting poles, the homestand, concessions, and fencing will remain as is. And then I'm going to actually just allow Jeff Goldstone, if he's prepared, to speak briefly about the proposed ticket booth and bathroom.
Happy to do so. If you can advance the slide. So
Yeah, if I can.
Okay, well, somebody can advance the slide. The ticket booth, and there we go. So this building is to provide new restrooms for the visitor side of the field, as well as ticket booth and storage for both the sports as well as physical education department. Drinking fountains that you can see that are accessible from the pathway around the field. And then on the upper floor, I think you can go to the next slide, there's a small crow's nest, which would be an area for visiting coaches and press to watch the game from a vantage point that's better than the stands. The building is going to be heated because if the field is accessible for longer seasons, then we thought it was appropriate for the bathrooms to be available for the longer seasons. Some of you who saw the earlier proposal saw that we had proposed an unheated building that would be drained in the winter. This one would be able to operate into the colder months. In order to do that, we had to design a building that also met the energy codes. So we are proposing fully insulated walls, a fully insulated roof structure as well as insulation as necessary on the foundations, separating the slabs, etc. Our concern, of course, was that since this would be relatively unsupervised in certain times, that it was a very durable building. So we're proposing a concrete block interior and exterior. So we're using a system of insulated concrete blocks for the outer walls. For those who have scrutinized the costs of the building, the costs that you've seen include the relocation of one of the light poles, as well as the installation of the stands, the new visitor stands that that Jason mentioned outside of the track area, so that the track, so that the stands don't impinge upon the playable size for the soccer field. Happy to answer other questions as they come up.
All right, well, we'll take it from there to allow Tim Severance to speak about the turf selection that the committee looked at for both turf and track.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jason. Good evening, everybody. So to start off with, the committee is selected for a turf, a synthetic turf field that is composed of a monofilament and split filament fibers so that it gets the best of both opportunities for all the different sports that you're going to be playing on it. And this would be infilled with about 1.5 to 2 inches of sand and pine infill. Last we gave this presentation, it was a sand and crumb rubber mix, but we've looked at other infills since that presentation and found that we can get for similar costs and increased playability with the sand and pine infill. So that's why the committee has decided to go with the sand and pine infill instead. And this is a 4-to-1 ratio of sand to pine. And at the end of its life cycle, when it needs to be replaced, it can be composted. Thank you. And then that whole assembly sits on top of a shock pad, which will greatly increase player safety and also field playability as well. And if you could move to the next slide, Jason. And then for a track, the committee has selected a athletic track consisting of a base layer of rubber, either 3/4 to 5/8 of an inch thick, that would be sealed with a water-based polyurethane spray with extra granules on top for traction, wear resistance, and things like that. It's essentially the highest end track that you can get for a high school. And this kind of track works very well when coupled with a synthetic turf field. And now I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Green to explain the nuances of turf fields and the science of it a little bit more.
Okay, good evening. I'm Laura Green. I'm delighted to be here with you all, if only virtually. So I'm a chemist and a toxicologist, and my role on the team is to make certain that the materials that are selected are environmentally responsible and, of course, would be safe not only for the environment, but also for players and coaches and others utilizing the fields and the track. The materials that the team has selected, although obviously some of them are man-made as opposed to natural, there's lots of testing that's been done on these, and the testing shows that the synthetic turf, for example, is a quite inert material. It's sort of ordinary polyethylene, probably the most common plastic, certainly in the world. And the materials that are going to be used as infill, as was just mentioned, are a combination of pine and sand, which have been tested to make certain that they're actually quite clean. They're in fact cleaner than dirt, as it were, because of course they haven't accumulated some of the pollutants that are ubiquitous in modern society and therefore are in topsoil and pretty much every other surface on Earth. So that's my role in this project, is to look at the pollutants that might be associated with natural surfaces, the contaminants that might be associated with synthetic surfaces, and make certain that both the natural fields and the synthetic fields are environmentally compatible, and as I said, are healthful. So like I think the rest on the team, I'm delighted to answer any questions you might have, but in a nutshell, that's from the point of view of chemistry and toxicology, what this proposal looks like to me.
All right. And then I'll just provide the brief overview of the opinion of probable cost for the proposed improvements. We've broken them down into their 4 component parts, which includes the track repair and improvements, which are approximately $943,000, the installation of the turf system and associated with site work and underdrain, which costs approximately $1.6 million. The multi-use building, which, as Jeff mentioned, also includes some of the installation costs associated with the bleachers and the lighting at $354,000. And then the remaining site features that we discussed: scoreboard, long and triple jump, pole vault, visitors, accessible pathways and parking areas are included at about $586,000. So for a total estimated construction cost of $3.5 million. And I'm gonna just maybe hand this over briefly to Renee Gordon, who can speak very briefly about the
Can I just ask a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, I didn't hear you say anything about the lights. Was that included in the 1.6 number?
The lighting is actually included in the multi-use building number. That includes the lighting as well. Yep.
Okay.
And so at this point, I'll hand it over to Renee, who can speak about the about how this will fit into the overall budget for the year.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty, so I hope you can hear me okay. I'm using web browser instead of my actual Zoom app. So currently, we actually have 3 bonds in various stages of payoff associated with the middle school construction. The first of which is actually going to be paid off next month. So just to kind of give you a baseline, the principal amount of that payment is $335,000. So we make that last payment next month, that goes away. In looking at some estimates that I got from the Vermont Bond Bank, if we were to go out to bond for $3.5 million and finance that over 12 years,
So I guess I'll still ask my question, but I voted for this, and I am very convinced by the argument that our kids need something better. I love soccer. I take my kids to go watch soccer games, and I completely understand how poor the field is and in what bad shape it is. So I am very sympathetic to those arguments. I just want to say that first. And I think that there needs to be an upgrade of some kind. I do still have some serious misgivings about the environmental impact of this. And I know in our last meeting, Dr. Laura Green said, don't worry about this additive. It's just this inert chemical. I just want to add, a school at Mount Sinai Children's Hospital has recommended a moratorium on all new turf fields for children, just given the amount of chemicals in crumb rubber that are linked to cancer and other health concerns. So first of all, if we did away with that as our fill, that would help convince me. but I'm still not completely convinced because I have read articles that have shown that PFAS is found in turf, in the backing and in the blades. And I'm not completely convinced by Dr. Laura Green because I tend to know, I did research her a little bit, and I think she's got a background in the industry. So I would love to hear from other environmentalists if we had that opportunity. So I just, in doing my research, I guess I haven't really found that there's a completely safe way to do turf. And that does concern me. And I don't want to be in a position where we say we're either investing in our kids or we're not. There is some concern to me in putting in a whole field of plastic. We're dealing with microplastics and we're dealing with chemicals that we know in the United States we're not very good at informing the public on the dangers of chemicals at the outset. I think the research and the testing is pretty far behind where it needs to be. And so there is just a lot of doubt and maybe not enough certainty for folks to be concerned. But I think we do already have a PFAS problem in Bennington, and it should be on the forefront of people's minds. And I just want to leave you with that.
Well, thank you for your comments, Carrie. I guess I would just start by saying that our interest and intent in hiring Dr. Green was to not advocate for any specific position, but rather to educate us on the environmental and potential environmental and health effects of the materials that we were selecting. Which is actually the main reason why the team and the committee have moved away from crumb rubber, specifically because there are known environmental impacts associated with the use of that material. The turf material in general was, at least from what we've been told is not of concern. Laura, I don't know if you want to say anything in addition to that or whether that's adequate.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for your comments. So a couple of things. Mr. Grobman and Ms. Hurl and I did have a conversation a little bit ago. And the main facts that came out, I think, are relevant. It is certainly true that the proposed field is plastic. I mean, there's no argument there. It is not true, though, that the proposed field would leach or otherwise emit the kinds of water-soluble PFAS that do plague Bennington and many other communities, not only in the United States, but around the world. The reason that those water-soluble PFAS are in groundwater and drinking water, of course, doesn't have anything to do with synthetic turf fields. It has instead to do with the former and sometimes current uses of aqueous film-forming foams for fighting fires, and sometimes with industrial discharges such as from Saint-Gobain and other factories. There's simply no correlation at all between synthetic turf fields, which do contain part per million levels of a fluoropolymer, and soluble PFAS, which again are indeed a problem around the world. So there's just no connection between the two. You are quite right to be concerned about water-soluble PFAS in Bennington or anywhere else, and for that matter in the body of firefighters. But athletes playing on synthetic turf do not accumulate PFAS in their bodies. Rainwater does not leach soluble PFAS from plastic fields. That's just not a thing. So I think, unfortunately, part of the problem is just a little bit of a lack of communication between folks who are genuinely and appropriately concerned about PFAS contamination and the community of chemists such as myself who have studied in some detail the chemical makeup of plastic. So yes, I know a lot about plastic because, among other things, that's what chemists do. They study materials. I don't consider it a bias. I consider it an expertise. So I hope that helps a little bit.
I have a question.
Just wait, okay?
Got his hand up.
I'd like to ask a question to Laura. There's been a lot of discussion about the safety of the fields and the testing. Does it have PFAS in it? I've done some research as well, and the testing, is all based on EPA guidelines, and all of this, and the previous speaker just talked about those tests not being, up to grade or whatever. Can you comment about testing, and is it reliable and all that sort of stuff?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The testing that's been done includes not only tests that EPA does for all solid materials that would go out into the environment, whether it's plastic or materials that go to a landfill. There are certainly standard tests that are done. Also, there are sort of beyond standard tests, if you will, that are not done by EPA or state regulatory agencies, but are done to sort of push the material to the extreme, as it were. And those tests have also been done on these materials. One of those tests, which again doesn't simulate the environment, and so isn't used by regulators, but does get to the literally the atomic structure of the material, is a test in which you destroy the material. You incinerate it till it's nothing but ash. And then you look at the constituents, literally the atoms in that ash. And you do find fluorine atoms because there is a fluoropolymer that, as I mentioned, is present in the part per million range in the polyethylene in order to make the plastic grass blades. It's a polymer. It contains fluorine, but it is not water soluble. It's a solid inert material. And again, you can only find it when you destroy the material, intentionally looking for its atomic parts. So again, I think this has led to a fair amount of confusion. Technically speaking, fluoropolymers, because they are organic and they're fluorinated, are a kind of PFAS. PFAS just stands for perfluorinated alkyl substance, and alkyl is a kind of organic chemical. So they are fluorinated polymers, but they're inert, just as PVC pipe, for example, is a chlorinated polymer, but it's not a source of chlorine. It's certainly not a source of vinyl chloride, which is a toxic gas. So once a material is polymerized, it's inert. And as I mentioned, the plastic field is mostly a different kind of polymer. It's mostly polyethylene, just PE. It's the stuff that's recycled. There's high density PE and low density PE. It's literally the most common plastic in the world. In order to make plastic extruded products, however, you have to add a little bit of a fluoropolymer in order to allow the extrusion process to happen in a factory. But that fluoropolymer has no impact whatsoever on the environment because it too is a solid material. It just doesn't go anywhere.
Thank you. That explains how people can be so confused about the toxicity. It's definitely complex for sure.
Jim,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, so Dr. Green, I also just wanted to ask, maybe it'll help, I don't know, but to give people a little bit of context, basically PFAS in that inert state could be found in, 20 different things in this room, correct? Or even in terms of things students would come in contact with, laptops, basketballs.
Pizza box.
Well, it's actually in me. Surgical sutures are made of polyvinylidene fluoride, which is a kind of PFAS. So if any of you have had operations with sutures, unless they're the dissolvable kind, or if any of you have artificial joints, as I do, the plastic in your artificial joints is typically a fluoropolymer combined with other plastics. So yeah, it's not only in a bunch of stuff like surgical sutures, it's in a bunch of us on the Zoom call right now. And of course, surgeons use it because, again, it doesn't dissolve. It doesn't dissolve in rainwater, and it doesn't dissolve in people.
So would it be safe to say that anything associated with PFAS has kind of become a dirty word, but it's a small subsection of PFAS that's actually causing these problems?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as the difference between small water-soluble molecules and large polymers. So, if this field were entirely polyvinylidene fluoride, if it were nothing but a bunch of sutures laying out on a field, first of all, it wouldn't be a very good field. But second of all, it would be entirely PFAS in that sense, but it would also be entirely inert and of no toxicologic significance. So really, the difference is just simply between solid polymeric inert materials and very small water-soluble materials like PFOA and PFOS and a handful of others, which again are in firefighting foams and in emissions from factories, but those are not polymers. So yeah, there's a sort of a big world out there of chemicals, and some are soluble and some aren't.
Thank you.
So we have a question in the chat asking what is the crumb that's used for the field? So if someone could share that outside of the chat, could someone, Jason or someone, talk what the crumb is?
I'll let Tim, I'll pass it over to Tim Severance, who can
Thank
just
you.
repeat the description of the final selected material.
Sure. So the final selected that we've selected, or that the committee, I should say, has selected, is not a crumb rubber and sand infill. It is actually a sand and pine infill. So, wood infill. On the slides, I don't know if you can bring it back up again, Jason. We do have a picture of kind of what the wood infill looks like.
I'm working on it.
And so while Jason's bringing that up, it's a 4-to-1 mix. So 4 parts sand, or 4 pounds of sand to 1 pound of the wood pine infill. Yep, that slide right there. Yep, so that middle one there, that is your wood pine infill that is mixed with your sand, and that is what goes in between the fibers of your field. And that's essentially it. And then that's compacted down, and that essentially makes your field. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I see Ed Letourneau has his hand up.
Yeah, for Dr. Green, could you somehow help correlate what you have told us with the studies that have been done, like for the one that was mentioned from Mount Sinai, to say there should be a moratorium on all these fields?
Sure. I believe the Mount Sinai study that was referred to, first of all, is a bit dated at this point, and second, referred, as I think the speaker mentioned, to crumb rubber, which, as you know, is typically recycled car tires and recycled truck tires. So it has nothing to do with this project, because, as was just discussed, although there was initially a consideration of using a crumb rubber sand infill, when we talked about it a bit more, we came to the conclusion that not using crumb rubber and instead using this virgin yellow pine, which is sort of an engineered sawdust, if you will. It's larger than sawdust, but it's basically just yellow pine. I've looked at the tests of that material. It's very, very clean stuff. It's literally cleaner than dirt. And it's far cleaner than recycled tires. So I think whatever the Mount Sinai material was that was being referenced, if it's what I think it was, as I said, A, it's a bit dated, and B, it has nothing to do with the current proposal.
Thank you.
I'm looking to see if there's any other, I'm looking at the chat. Ashley?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when we initially, I can explain the decision behind the crumb rubber and everything a little bit more so you have more detail with that. So basically when we went to look at infills and we were making the selection as the committee, we didn't have this pine and sand information at that time. So when we did this, yes, we did select crumb rubber because the other natural infills all freeze. This pine wood does not. So with the information that we had, that's what led us to the initial,
Ashley, did you say freeze? They freeze?
like freeze, like it freezes in the cold temperatures. So like, I think, and Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was like bamboo or something. I don't know. I can't remember what exactly the infill was, but it was, an organic infill, for lack of a better term, I guess. But it did freeze, and that's why we stayed away from that. Obviously, with lacrosse playing the first week in April and practicing the middle and beginning of March, that was going to be an issue, as well as potentially football playing at the end of November. So freezing was the biggest issue at first, which led us to the crumb rubber. And then obviously after, we've spoke with Dr. Green, we've looked into other sources, and, the companies have brought forth this pine wood option, which we have obviously jumped on and now going in that direction. So I hope that kind of clears up why we initially started and then why we moved and kind of the thought process for that.
See any other hands up? Let me, Ed.
I have one more question. Do we have any estimate on what the annual maintenance cost is going to be, which is not part of the bond?
I don't know if there's anyone can address that.
I think Tony may be able to, but I do know initially when we were looking at maintenance, it is far less maintenance, on a turf field, and it's going to depend on the contract and I think also the turf provider, like who that is. But Tony may be able to speak more about that. But I do know that the maintenance, what we've heard from athletic directors, the athletic director from South Burlington, the athletic director from Burton, it is far less maintenance. Like it's a once a year, thing that, somebody may come in, it may be part of the contract. Other than that, it may be like a little sweeper that goes across and like lifts the grass fibers, but that is it. Like it just maintains itself. So it's far less than what would take for fertilizer, lining the field, mowing the field, bagging, all that. But Tony, you may be able to speak more eloquently on that.
Yeah, now, I remember seeing a proposed maintenance cost, Jason, in the initial feasibility study, but I can tell you guys that I did a rough estimate the other day of what we spent basically from the middle of August till now. And I factored in painting the field, I factored in mowing the field, I factored in the Milorganite on the field, the man hours, the fuel, and we're upwards around anywhere between $13,000 and $15,000 we've spent just from the middle of August till now on that field. And the sad part is, like everybody shared, our soccer team can't even play their playoff games there. And I'm going to tell you right now, if we get the rain they're talking about tomorrow, I'm scared of what it's going to look like for the football team. It's going to be bad. So, we finally did a little TLC on this field to try to get it to the point where they could at least use it this year and have somewhat of a season. And they're doing phenomenal in their sports, and they've all made the playoffs, and they can't even play there. And that just breaks my heart. So I can tell you that if I remember, Jason, I think wasn't the cost about $15,000 a year in maintenance for the field estimated, something like that. And we've spent that, just south of that already, just in the few months of fall sports.
If I recall correctly, it was approximately comparable or less than normal turf maintenance.
I could add to that if I get a chance.
Yeah. Good, and then I have Kerry Bond after that. But
Okay, go ahead. So
Can I say your name?
my
So-
name's Peter Janellis. I've been taking care of the baseball field now since '08. Maintenance is kind of my thing. So to address you, Ed, I've looked in actually to the maintenance of the turf field, and it's a little bit more than what Mike just mentioned, because to do a really nice field, you do want to have a piece of equipment, and there are several pieces of equipment available out there, but there's like 3 phases. There's a brushing, there's a disinfecting, and then there's like a leveling and a kind of a fluffing of the fill. And there's machines out there that which we have to purchase one for sure. But they will do all that kind of in one sweep. And I looked at some of the maintenance protocols, and basically, it's a little bit more than, a once a year thing could be by the company, and that would be probably in a contract. But you do have to, the high school maintenance crew is going to have to do some maintenance on it, and Ashley would be involved with that too. And basically, it's like every 2 weeks or every month, a major kind of like brushing, disinfecting with this machinery, and it actually makes the surface a lot more safe when you do it that way. It's actually clean. So, and I don't know what the actual cost. It might be $25,000, but I think you can find people who can donate that. Certainly.
So would you describe that machine as like a Zamboni is for ice? This is a
similar
specialty machine for that surface.
They make some machines that you drag, but that's not ideal. You want something that you can get on, ride it, drive it. It won't take long at all. And as you know, I know the maintenance crew very well. The amount of hours that it takes is a lot. It will decrease man hours. It should not be anywhere near as expensive as what is being done now.
Can I say something on
The
that?
next speaker should be Kerry Bond. She had her hand up, Ashley. So, Kerry.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask this, and I hope, forgive me if it's already been answered. I can't remember. Is the cost of recycling the turf and replacing it, I think we talked about it lasting about 15 years, if that's correct. Has that been built into our estimate? And do we know what the cost is going to be down the line for this? And also, is there any possibility, not that we would want to, but how difficult is it to revert back to a natural field?
Not bad.
So, the total cost of the cost of recycling it is I believe the actual turf field itself, Tim, if correct me if I'm wrong, is approximately $400,000.
I believe so, yeah.
So the vast majority of the money is actually in the drainage system and the prep and installation and shaping of the field. The top material itself, which I believe is replaced every approximately 20 years, that's somewhere in the range of 400,000. So the $3.5 million is really an all-in cost for all of the facilities upgrades that we're proposing, and that the turf field replacement itself is a small fraction of that.
And the turf would need to be replaced at the 12-year mark, because at the 12-year mark, that's the kind of maximum playability for a field. They can sometimes go up to 14, and then that's when the field is taken up and replaced. The infill is composted, and the actual fibers are then going to be recycled at that point, and then a new field will be put down, and they actually put it down depending on the shock pad that's chosen. The one that the committee has selected is going to remain in place. The shock pad will remain in place, and then a new turf field will go over that. So the $400,000 number for the field is actually decreased because it does not include the replacement of the shock pad. It'll just be the field and the infill.
And then with respect to reverting it back to a grass field, the drainage system underneath would not prohibit someone from coming back, putting in some kind of separator fabric, and then bringing a topsoil to go back over what that cross section of material that was synthetic.
Okay, thank you.
I don't
Jim,
see any hands up.
Jim,
Yep.
just have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Tim.
I'm curious as to the lining of the field. If we have a number of different sports events being on that field and they take different lines, how does the field cope with that?
So I can answer that question. So when the field is essentially when the field is purchased and then being installed, what they will actually do is they will put in markers for different sports, so that when you go to paint the field, you can actually just kind of connecting the dots and paint the field very easily. And you can actually so you can do that, but as well you can do permanent inlays of end zones and sidelines and things like that. So you can have permanent lines that are different colors, as well as you can have essentially markers that will help you delineate for different sporting events.
And then how do you erase those lines if another sporting event comes in?
So Tim, I can speak just a little from the sports side of things. I think we're talking about having a permanently sewn in line for football and a permanently sewn in line for soccer. So those two sports would be, one would be yellow, one would be white, or whatever. And that's what the kids are used to right now, is playing on, on a field with multiple lines, and they know which lines matter to them. Then I believe lacrosse, because right now they're still deciding whether it's boys, girls, universal, that I think can be painted on in a blue or in another color. So you can paint right on the, on the synthetic fibers. But I know Ashley and I have spoken, and we're thinking permanently lining for football and lining for soccer. So that wouldn't have to be done. It would be sewn in and just there all the time. And then add the lines, as Tim was saying, there could be markers, there could be things set up so that the maintenance guys could add paint, line paint that works on synthetic surface, similar to what they do right now with the grass. So 2 permanent and then added lines for others.
Thank you.
Looking to see any other hands up.
Is that it, Jim?
Checking.
I'm gonna say something here, and I'm waiting to see if anybody else is.
I don't see anybody right now, so Fran, if you want to.
Okay, I want to get back to the financial part of it. I have the Spinelli Field improvement construction cost of $8,921. Now I've got a bottom line here, $5,938,270. Now I did go to the business manager, Renee, and I asked her about this with you, the 3.5. This other 2.8 million is going to be just stuffed into our budget somewhere. So I don't know if Renee wants to talk about that, but I can tell you, we don't have the money for this stuff. Now I've said it before, it's free. I'm not saying I'm not against any of this. I think, yes, there's some improvements. I don't believe that the building was condemned that we have. I know it's been talked about tearing down, because I asked Tony about it, and it's been talked about tearing it down, but it has been condemned. So I want to make that perfectly clear. That's going to cost us some money, and we have the weight room, the wrestling room, a new central office somewhere. Who the hell knows where that's going to be and what's going to cost. We know that we have a big construction cost that's going to come down on the high school. We know that. That's coming. That's a given. We're not even done with the offices that we've started before. And again, I'm not against any of this. I think we ought to take a pause, as Senator Manchin says, like that trillion thing they want to pass in Washington. And we ought to do some of this. Now, you've got concession stand that's there. They cost between $40,000 and $45,000. Granted, there's no labor in it. When I see a storage building for $354,000, I want to hit somebody in the face because that's totally asinine, ridiculous, whatever you want to call it. Now, they want $100,000. You got $100,000. I suggest you figure out how the hell you're going to do the building. This is ridiculous to go to the taxpayers when you have people that can't even afford to fix their house, fix their roof, or anything else. This is Bennington. It's not Burton that just got the $28 million endowment. It's not Williams College. Hell, they don't even get to spend all the interest they make on their money, for Christ's sakes. And all I'm saying is, take a look at this stuff. It's going to cost you more than you think, and it is going to raise your taxes. You got to be a fool to think that this isn't going to raise your taxes. When I hear somebody say, well, it's going to cost nothing, it's not going to raise the taxes. Yes, it is. Because you got another $2.8 million in there that you're going to be stuffed into your budget, whether you like it or not. And that's your engineering, design, and permitting. It's the life cycle cost. And yeah, the annual maintenance cost estimated is $15,000 a year, up to 25 for natural turfs. So, you know, all I'm saying is, I want the kids to play on safe fields. I think grass is still safe as far as I'm concerned. I know that field was done by, I think Ron Pembroke did the field, and I talked to people that did that field for the drainage and stuff. And you just we gotta have more concern for the taxpayer. I've been bombarded by taxpayers ask me, well, why do they need this? And I've told them some of it. I know the building. I've looked at the building, the storage building. Yeah, we can redo it and stuff. But I just think there's things in here you can cut out of this. I think we got to take a pause and do it later. That's what I think. But that's my opinion.
Thanks,
We have
Brandon.
a question in the chat. It has not been addressed. All right. The field was done in the 90s and the booster shack was built by volunteers. What happened to that? Anyone answer? Tony or Ashley? Anyone? Mike Moy? Anybody who's been at the high school long enough to know, can address that question?
I don't quite understand the question. What?
I don't understand what the question is, so
Can the writer unmute her mic? Sue Rice, would you like to ask the question?
Yes, I would like to ask the question. I sat on the school board in the 90s, and I remember this argument about the fields being redone and the amount of money it was going to cost then. And we did it, but it was done in the 90s, and I guess I don't understand. I haven't been privy to all the information regarding redoing the field. I am privy to the booster shack. Is that what you are talking about, tearing down or redoing?
No. You're talking about like where the concession stand is and all that?
Yeah, the one that was done by the volunteers.
Yeah, no, the building they're talking about is on the opposite side of the field.
So you're going to actually build another bathroom center up on the opposite side of the field?
Yes.
Can I ask why? Because
Sue, there are bathrooms. Oh, it's the red building when you first walk in. There's bathrooms on both sides. So there's bathrooms. There's 2 bathrooms there when you walk in, plus storage, plus like the light hole. So as the field starts being used more for communities and more for we want to make it handicap accessible. You don't. If you're on the other side and you're in the bleachers, like we have like a bathroom on one side and a bathroom. So it's just, there already are bathrooms there. They're just not being used anymore. But that red building's been there for as long as the field's been there, I think.
But does that mean that the booster shack isn't being utilized efficiently?
Mike,
because I know there's handicap bathrooms in that.
Yep. So I'm Ashley. I'm the athletic director. I can answer that. So Booster Shack is staying the 100% same. We do utilize those bathrooms currently. So yes, we do have handicap accessibility on the home side of the field. And we do have bathrooms there. Nothing is going to change in that building. We're still using that building. The issue that we're coming with now is our crowd sizes and all the events that we host. I mean, a football game, there'll be 2,500 people there on any given Friday night. You know, there's a ton of people soccer games, and the more the community uses it, the more need there's going to be for you know, bathrooms per person. So we do have to, you know, and I think maybe Jason can talk on this a little bit, or Tim, whoever, but you do have to offer a certain amount of restrooms for your crowd sizes. And we are significantly below that as of right now. So we actually have 2 porta potties that are on the visitor side of the field currently that are used to help with that high volume use of the restrooms. Does that make sense?
Well, I understand what you're saying. I'm just questioning the timing in our, you know, time of, we're in a recession and we're expected to have more inflation and things are going to be costing more. I'm not exactly sure how we're expecting the taxpayers to pay for this. I understand that there's a bond that is coming off, and I believe it's off the middle school. So to say that we float a bond and we get the 3.5 million and then the tax rate stays stable, well, in some respects that says that the tax rate stays the same. And in other words, though, it means that our tax rate never goes down. It's like we're always paying for bonds. And I kind of understand frustration level of people in the town when they're the ones that are also having to tighten their own belts for their own homes.
I have Tony has his hand up, and then I have a hand in the room.
Yeah, guys, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that you're right, Fran. Condemned is probably not the right word for that building, but I can tell you that I have, from the building inspector, been told we can tear that building down.
That's
Reason
right.
being, it is critter infested. That's why there is no PE equipment in that building anymore. And we are not using the bathrooms anymore because I do not want people walking in those bathrooms and coming face to face with a mouse or another critter living in there. The reason we haven't torn it down, as I think Ashley said it before, is because our lighting breaker box and, you know, center for all the lights on the field are in that building. So if I had torn it down, say prior to the season, then I would have had to pay to have that relocated. And it just didn't make sense with us proposing a new field. And I also understand Mrs. Rice's question as far as the taxpayers and everything, but I think we have to look at the playability of this field. We live in Vermont. We've already talked about it. I'm not going to go into it again, but we also have to look at these kids are the future of our community. And being the facilities director and coming and looking at that field and going to all the sporting events, we need to do something. And grass, unfortunately, where we are, I don't feel is the answer. It's just not the answer. It's not going to give us the playability that we need. The upkeep that is going to have to be done to this field, the money that we're going to have to spend yearly on the seeding and fertilizer and the actual TLC, to me, just, it doesn't make sense in this environment. If we were down south, fine. If we were in a different climate, fine. In the Northeast, if we want to maximize the playability of these kids and give them all the opportunity to play on a nice, safe field, to me, this is the only way to go. So that's it.
We have a hand up in the room here, Peter.
Yeah, we have a couple of hands up.
Yeah.
Peter's been asking.
I just want to make a Peter Janellis again. I business owner, my family, from the community, born and raised, my father born and raised. Most people knew of my father and mother's restaurant. Paying taxes in the community and being sensitive about taxes is ultimate. I mean, we've talked about this, and it's a situation where people can't afford it. I get it. I'm one of those people, very sensitive. I've paid a lot of taxes over the years. But in this case here, this is an investment in the community. So I just wanted to clarify something. Maybe somebody can answer this question. When I've been doing my research about this project and finding out what the cost is and what it would do to the tax base, I've been told by several that we really don't know what the exact cost of this project is. We're floating this bond question out to the community for 3.5, but it might not be 3.5. And I totally agree. Everything is way, way, way overpriced. And I challenge Jason and others. I've talked to the Clark Company. Jason, you know of those guys. They do all sports fields in the Northeast. You know, I got the pricing on a turf field with lights at about 1.3. So our numbers here seem like they're a little bit on the high side. So my you know, type of approach would be, you know, in a way I understood it, that this is not really the exact cost of this project yet. It still hasn't gone out to bid. So the challenge is to find bidders to do it less expensively. Therefore, then we wouldn't be spending as much money. So maybe someone can comment to me about that, because that is a serious question that everyone is confused about.
So I can answer that, Peter. You raise a really important question. Our job as the consultants for this facility is really to prepare the school district and prepare the voters for potential costs. And so our job is, you don't ever want an engineer building anything. We can only really design things and make sure that they're constructed properly, but I'm not a capable operator. I have a lot of respect for those who do it. So our job is to really provide an opinion of what probable cost. As you've identified, this is a very challenging time for that to occur because there's a fair amount of price volatility. We have, you know, at the rounds of estimates that we provided, we have provided some additional padding to ensure that we can at least accommodate the base project and not have that exceeded in the ask that the voters are asking to spend. So that's really our purpose. The 3.5 is a budget value. We believe that we can, that this project can be constructed, at least the base costs can be constructed for that. As Renee mentioned, if there continues to be inflationary activities beyond even our estimates, then what we would typically do after a bidding process would be to look at value engineering or removing of some key elements to ensure that the project comes in at under budget. So there's from my perspective, what I try to do is to estimate the project as best we can, provide sufficient padding so that the project's sort of base goals can be accommodated without having to go back and ask for more money, because we understand just how challenging that is in a public process. I hope that's clarified.
Can I follow? Yeah, can I just add? So does that mean that potentially this project could be bid and come in under the 3.5?
It is possible, and I'm always happy when it does. And I always feel like I've won the lottery that day when that happens. So,
all right, I'm gonna go with someone who hasn't had a chance yet. Leon has his hand up. Leon.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, Jason answered part of the question. Part of the School Board Association, when they brought in all the engineers that talked about designing projects for buildings and fields and so forth, the one that we actually used for the middle school was the one that ran the last school board one. And they said one of the biggest mistakes is to go out to the public for a bond vote and don't have enough money, enough funds to complete the project. You can always do the things that Jason just talked about. We're going to go out and bid on things and make sure that they come in and that the people that are doing the jobs perform them within budget or less than what we asked the taxpayers, because we're not going back to the taxpayers. That was one of the things that I said before we started this project. When we go out with a bond, we're going out for the bond and we're not going back again. So that's one of the things. The second thing that everybody keeps forgetting about is the bathrooms that are being using porta potties right now that are talking about being torn down and replaced.
they are used by the baseball field, the softball field people, the track people that are all gathered in right around the side of the school where most of the people park and enter into the field area. And we need to not have all of the baseball teams and all the softball teams running in and out of the school or down in the locker room. They use those bathrooms. That's all I got to say.
Rand, you said you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Tony. Tony, I was on that committee that we went when Paul Denzero had your job, and I agreed to tear those buildings down. So I looked at the bathrooms and stuff. So I agree on that. I just think it's totally ridiculous what they want to put that building here. I'm sorry, but that's just my opinion. Just wanted you to know that.
Jim, are we on the?
Sue Rice, you have your hand up. Is it up that you didn't take down, or is it up again?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't take it down.
Okay, that's okay.
Beg your pardon.
Anyone else? I'm going to look again. Not seeing any hands up. Anyone else in the room?
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for participating in this.
Did you have your hand up, Ed?
Yeah, there's one thing that hasn't been mentioned in all of these meetings is that this is not a direct educational thing where taxpayers are already stressed and we're talking about adding to the budget for a non-direct educational activity. And I sympathize with the taxpayers. I've had a number of them grab me and say, what is the matter with this board thinking we can afford this?
Okay, Corey?
Well, I just want to say that I sympathize with the taxpayers as well, Mr. Letourneau, but what we're saying, the school board is here to do what's right for the students of the community and their parents. Like, that's what our job is. And I'm telling you, we do require an investment in our kids. And this is something that needs to happen. For safety purposes, again, I talked about school pride. If you've been around the kids, you'd understand why this is important to them. Why, the way that they talk about their school right now, and you would see a difference. And
those people ought to be going out and fundraising part of the cost.
I'd like to add on that. Ed, if you don't mind, Peter Janelles again, we know each other. I would just like to say that the athletic aspect of education is extremely important. It's not just about classrooms. You could say, borrowing a term from one of my previous coaches, that it is a classroom. It teaches you about team building and everything else. I'm a direct example of that. If I didn't have that experience, I don't think I ever would have been able to, survive veterinary school, to be honest with you. It is a challenge. I learned a lot of things on those ball fields. So, to rebut that argument, it's equally as important, and it should be part of every educational process.
And I just want to say, I couldn't agree more with that, first of all, but also it is directly, obviously, I'm a little bit biased having been a PE teacher, but I'm sorry, physical education is a direct part of education, and for them to be able to use those fields and for us to have a functioning track, which the students use. So I couldn't agree more that being a student athlete, athletics are part of the high school experience, or I should say extracurriculars in particular, in general. We need to fund extracurriculars in general. We can talk about reading and writing all we want, but they need things to read and write about. And so we need to fund those kids' passions as well.
I have another hand up on the screen.
Football too.
Ed, I'm going by hands raised. Is it Swab?
Shaw,
Yeah, thank you.
I apologize because I wasn't here at the beginning of the meeting and this may have already been covered, but I was wondering if the issue of the toxic nature of the materials in Sinturf had been thoroughly covered. I missed all of it if it has.
Yeah. Yes, we've had a lengthy discussion on it. Do you have anything in particular you would like to ask Dr. Green?
I'm sorry, I missed the conversation. Is this meeting, has it been recorded?
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube.
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube. It
Oh,
will-
great.
The
Okay.
TV is present and recording.
Okay, so I will look for it there.
There was a thorough discussion, and I think if you do review that, your questions will be answered.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Sue Rice, is your hand up again?
It is.
Okay.
Again, this may have also been discussed at a previous time or even tonight. I have heard or read information that like the NFL Players Association presidents have said that there are higher rates of injuries and things like that on turf versus grass.
Sorry, are you done, Ms. Rice?
I said that the.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just didn't know if you were done asking.
No, I was just curious. Did we discuss the data based on that? It seems like.
So I'd like to field that one. I was a kinesiology major in college. And so it's a fair question. And it is true that the NFL Players Association does prefer natural grass to turf. What I will say is that it's not a good equivalency at all. For one, and again, this isn't a knock on our maintenance staff at all, but there's only so much that they can do. They only have so much time. They only have so many resources. And natural grass for the NFL is not the same as natural grass for Mount Anthony Union High School. The other thing I'll say about it, and that's in terms of being able to maintain the field. The other thing that I'll say about it is that NFL players are much bigger and stronger and produce much more force than Mount Anthony players could ever hope to my chagrin, unfortunately. But yeah, the non-contact injuries in particular, it's not going to be nearly as much of a concern for a high school athlete as it would be. And actually, there's a lot of studies that suggest that, especially female athletes, because of the angle of their hip to their knee, will be safer on a turf field in wet conditions because ACL, MCL injuries are much more common in females, and obviously on a slippery surface. So they'll be safer on a turf field where that slippery situation is not as much of an issue.
All right, thank you.
All right, if I don't see any other questions, I'm going to turn it over to the chair of the MAU board for a final reading.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation in this discussion and remind you that the voting takes place on November the 2nd. I'd just like to, because there is a difference in the time that the polls will be open, I'd just like to briefly go over it. In North Bennington, the polls will be open from 10 till 7. In Bennington, the polls will be open 7 to 7. In Pownell, the polls will be open 10 to 7. In Shaftesbury, the polls will be open 10 to 7. And in Woodford, the polls will be open 7 to 7. I hope you all vote. Thank you very much for participating. Good night.